Good morning and welcome to Wisdom-Nagan, just arrived. So today I'll speak following yesterday input about the reality as a social construction, another variable that I think is relevant to understand individual and society and culture. The issue, the variable of power, and the mechanism of power. Mainly, I'm interested in empowerment and disempowerment. I'll give some definition in a second. So, in the common language, we all know what is power and also what we consider the abuse of power. But in my opinion, to manage power in a constructive way and actually to avoid unintentional damage, which in my opinion happens too often, we need to understand power. And first of all, to consider that power is an all-pervasive reality. It's like energy, it's all pervasive reality. So, in my opinion, it's important to realize that no matter what role I have in society, I have some power, and I can be aware or not of how I use my power. I can be aware of not of how others use their power. I might be aware of not how power is generated, conserved or depleted, and how especially power is taken away from me or from others. So, what I'm saying is very simple. To be aware of the use and abuse of power means to be able to see the implicit aspect of what we call relationship, society, culture, organization, nation, diplomacy, etc., etc. And since I am a professional, I would talk about the normal issue of power in profession, especially helping profession, where the issue of power is called power differential, meaning that the two entities, one has more power than the other. I say that having awareness of the implicit aspect of power is a necessary ingredient, not only the one, to be able, a person or a community or an organization, to empower ourselves and others, which is a very crucial aspect. First of all, let's define power. I use the World Bank 2007 definition. Empowerment is the process of increasing the capacity of individuals or group to make, a community of course, to make choices and to transform those choices into the desired action and outcome and results. Conversely, disempowerment is the opposite. It's the reduction, it's taking away of power or authority of influence, after which individuals or group or society have to make their own choice, decision, and shape their own lives. I would say that we could read the human history as a longer sequence of how some people have been trying, often successful, to disempower others and how to use the power to exploit and oppress other people. Less, frequent occasion, and in the beautiful lecture that Gary gave yesterday, and also some of what Janani was showing us yesterday, also with the help of some beautiful movies, sometimes people actually are able to work to empower other people. Knowledge is power. Conversely, ignorance is lack of power. There is a third variable, even more debilitating. It's what in psychology and sociology we call learned helplessness, which is ignorant married with the self-sabotage. I'm a psychotherapist, and we see this dramatic entropic phenomena of self-sabotage all the time. Let me give you some example, then I'll go into that or some example with data and research of what I also was alluding yesterday. That different, I'm saying something that is obvious, but so little, and you don't read this on the newspaper. You don't read necessarily, even in political programs, very rare. And more than anything, you don't need read much on results of a social project. But different social construction, different narratives, different values, different concept of reality, different vision of what is the human nature, generate different relationship, generate different priority, different goals, and different action that basically can be divided. It's not the only reading it, but it can be divided on two big different, variables. Example of empowerment and example of disempowerment. So, any democratic relationship is an example of an empowering relationship. Every authoritarian relationship is the opposite. It's based on the mechanism of disempowerment. Equal rights and equal opportunity projects and programs are based on wanting to empower, while every oppression is exactly the opposite. The promotion of responsibility, asking people to be responsible for their action is an empowerment action. Every action that promotes passivity, I'll do it for you, sounds very nice, but I'm disempowering you because the meta message, I'm doing it for you because you're not able to do it, you wouldn't do it so well. My mother, that I love and, tremendous gratitude, it was a little too anxious, and I don't know if she felt that her son, me, I was the only child, was a little dumb. And so, not only she cut the meat in my plate when I was a baby, but when I was returning from United States, while I was teaching at the last level, postgraduate level, and I would visit her, and she would cook for me and cut my, pork chop. I said, Mother, what you doing? Oh, well, just to help you. He said, you think I'm handicapped? No. But basically the message, if they cut your meat, is not an empowering one, although it's full of love. But so maternal love in Italy can be disempowering sometimes. Of course, we have to deal with much more serious action, oppression, dictatorship, much more. I'd rather choose mother love that is the empowering than the dictatorship. But also worldview. For example, the biopsychosocial paradigm is based in making people responsible for their health, for their action. So it's an empowering paradigm. While reductionistic medicine, for example, is a disempowering paradigm because the role that gives to you is that of patient. Already the name is already the program, passive. obedient. In the technology, biofeedback, or what is called now neurofeedback, where with the machine you learn to go in alpha waves or activate, when the biofeedback was new, almost 40 years ago in California I was, and I learned from Camilla and other, Green and other that were friends in their labs how to raise the temperature of one of my hands and lower the temperature another. Also I learned how to raise or lower the temperature of my feet. And you say, you're kind of stupid, why do you do that? Well, have a long drive in an ice-cold winter and raising it by consciousness the temperature of your feet is pretty handy ability to develop. You know that people with high blood pressure without medication can actually lower their, of course they didn't invent anything except the machinery that the yoga teacher had been discovered 1,000 years ago. So yoga, I would say, is an empowering technique and not a disempowering technique. Transparency and shared knowledge, open sources relationship to knowledge is an empowering. The manipulation, the spinning of information is the opposite. Any program that is people-centered is an empowering program. Every aspect of racism, sexism, bigotry is a disempowering program. Everything that promotes and fosters deep contact with ourselves, with our emotion, with empathy, that promote respect for ourselves and for others, anything that promotes respect for human life and all aspects of life, animal and vegetable life is an empowering form. Alienation from the self, alienation from others, depletion of natural resources, depletion of human resources are obviously disempowering example. And in economy, we have here some like big economists. They would support the fact that with very little money, microcredit has been doing incredible successful feats of empowerment. Poor women just given $50, $100 in their village to create their own business. Much more successful of all this cathedral in desert, millions of euros or dollars spent to help a poor nation that go down the drain of bureaucracy, of graft, and creating a big project that actually sometimes destroy the connective, aspect of that society, of that culture. So, another very good, bad, meaning example of this empowerment is that the economy has become, from producing good, actually just like a monopoly game of just finance. And the subprime caper that we're still suffering from it at worldwide level, those people that created that got scot-free, almost all, and have a still salary of $1 million, although they ruin institution and people. Gary gave a lot of good example of empowerment, and anyhow, the point is, why everybody, no matter if you are an individual, an organization, a community, or a nation, you should be interested to be aware and to promote awareness of power, of empowerment and disempowerment. Well, because with this awareness, everybody wins, except the bad guys, the people that want to keep the people ignorant so they can rob them better of their power and this, of their goods, of their labor, of their natural resources. So, when you activate effective, empowering action, every stakeholders win. So, let's have some examples, some research for the work of production of goods and services. Employees' empowerment has a positive impact on the workplace quality of work, on employee satisfaction, also on clients of that firm satisfaction, by the way, on the spirit of collaboration, on productivity, on the cost, because basically employees become more productive. The morale of the workforce increases, the client satisfaction improves, and there are lower rates of absenteeism and turnover, people changing firms for which they want to work. Employee, their research, there are tons of research, I choose just this because at the time is short, and I want to do, actually, if I can, less than the time allotted for the presentation, so we can have more discussion. In that way, I would walk my talk, doing empowerment instead of just pontificating here. Employees that are empowered take charge of work because they have a sense of responsibility, of accountability, because they own their role and their work and their aims. They work better and they meet the deadline and the organizational goal. You could say they identify with it because they are participating. They have real power. Like in a family, when all the family decide how to spend the money that the family has, everybody's more responsible not to waste, resources. The bottom line shows definite results. 27% more profit, average. Even more, 50% customer loyalty, meaning I'm your customer, your employee treat me well, they meet the deadline, I'll continue to bring my money and my business to you. Very important. Millions, billions of dollars spent in customer satisfaction for all those results. This is a research of Van and Hart in 2006, but there's a man. Let's see the health profession. I'll nominate again Carl Rogers, not because it was my mentor, but he was in time, was the first. Ivo, the session before was mentioning Prigogine, Nobel Prize, for having shown that every organism has a tendency into life that is getting more and more sophisticated and organized pattern. Rogers picked on that, used it for his proposal of human nature, and brought a different, a revolutionarily different vision. The human nature is like all the life that we know, that can be trusted, because at the bottom of the human nature has a tendency to self-awareness and self-knowledge. Of course, this natural tendency can be hampered and stopped and blocked. But he also worked very much, giving the first contribution, also as a president of the American Psychological Association, of finding a different paradigm in the health profession. We're talking about the 40s here, that would be transcending the mechanistic reductionistic vision of the time, that were psychoanalysis and behavior modification. Why? Because he understood and made some research and showed that already at that time, research that had been confirmed up to today, that reducing people in a passive role actually is part of the problem, not of the solution. That putting people dependent, even of good suggestions, makes people passive. So that making people and treating and labeling them as passive patients that receive interpretation and suggestion how to change their behavior will increase their learned helplessness, and also that if you interpret, give a barrage of diagnostic labeling, that can be actually detrimental to their health, that it becomes a sort of iatrogenic, self-fulfilling prophet, see? And also that in the helping relation, giving people a passive role and giving them a pathological label, not wanting, but unwittingly, we might risk to become a force of political conservatism, a reactionary force, and to sacrifice dignity and rights of people, and to continue to support the status quo even when it's basically unjust. You know about, how psychiatric patients were treated in the past and so on and forth. So, basically, health, and I'll show some examples from the World Health Organization, has been, the field of healthcare has been evolving from a model of disease-centered, awareness to what is called patient or client-centered model, where the resources, the patient is not anymore treated as a passive agent that should only obey doctor's order and give a compliance to those orders, but an active agency to co-construe with the health personnel and with the health organization, might be the hospital, a new, better balance of his mental and physical health. Also, in the biopsychosocial paradigm, health is not seen as a mental or a body health, but body and mind, body and soul are aspects of the same organism. So, in the older disease-centered model, physicians make all the treatment decisions based on their clinical experience and based on their tests, medical tests. In patient-centered medicine, it's not that we throw away tests, it's not that we throw away, the experience of the clinician and diagnosis, but we co-create what is called a working alliance, and the decision, when decision can be made, are including the doctor, the patient, and not only we listen, like the scutocopio, the organ that is dysfunction, the heart of the patient, also his soul, meaning that he can talk about his fears and his anxiety, and also the families listen to. In this way, the result is, this is good medicine. Treating people, empowering people is good medicine. Why? The results are that I showed in the other course, that we promote empowerment, that we promote resilience. We promote something that the researchers show very clearly. Patients that trust their doctor, their hospital, they are empowered, have a better result in surgery. Meaning what? Better result in surgery? Are you kidding? No. Better results, meaning they have less post-surgery secondary problem. They stay less day in bed, and they are more compliant because there is a good working alliance. So following the order of the expert on how many pills, at what time to take it, they have a more effective treatment. So everybody wins. The Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality of the National Institute of Mental Health in the United States this research, patient-centered care, customizing care to meet the patient needs. So these are not the hippie doctors talking about new wave treatment. This is very serious national agency. And the research showed that when patients are treated as an active agency, when there is patient-centered medicine, there is a good result on the line. Best treatment strategy depend on patient preference, and my result that they're involved in the treatment decision. So what are the results? Better health, better care, lower cost. Everybody gains. And also this is the same agency. You know that in the States and other countries, there is actually, it's more cheap and people are more happy that if it's possible, they are treated at their home. The health personnel visit them at home, and so they don't have to be in an anonymous hospital. I want also to mention very briefly that if we look at the whole person, instead of only in a mechanistic reductionism at the dysfunctional organ, and we treat only the organ, that there is ample research. A person becomes a patient, has to go to the hospital for treatment, and is put in a room with a window, and through the window the person can see greenery, trees, grass. Then compare, see similar, comparable data of the problems they have. Another patient is put in a room that has a window, but it looks over another building. The window, you see the concrete and everything. Third patient, room, no windows whatsoever. Guess who gets better results in terms of its health? In terms of the day of being recover fast, less secondary. Why? Well, that's exactly as we were talking the other day when we studied the placebo effect. Why I trust that this pill is going to treat my symptom better than what is going on the daily basis? Because human beings are I'll say it in English instead of mean-making organism. No, we produce the meaning in which we live. So if I have trust, the trust I embody and the trust on a pill that is sugar can actually do wonders. But they are not mysterious wonders. It's the enormous capacity we have to create the reality in which we live. On some extent, if I think I'm so optimistic, I think I'm so energized by your lecture that now I'm empowered and I can fly, and I jump out of the window wanting to fly. Guess what is happening with Zucconi? I'm so light that I crash myself to the ground, no matter what my thinking is and my belief system and my trust. So we talk in realistic terms, not mechanicistic and reductionistic. The same thing, my third example, is about education. We were talking just before. Student-centered education, by the way, is not something that we're talking today. It's a long, noble tradition. John Dewey, philosopher and famous pedagogue, the one that said long time ago, the problem with education is there are too many teachers, too many professors, and very few promoters of learning. I totally agree with that. And the work of Jean Piaget, Vygotsky, Carl Rogers, and all the fathers and mothers of humanistic psychology. Rogers did a lot of research, still going on student-centered learning. Student-centered learning, it moves away from the traditional teacher-centered learning, where the professor, the teacher, goes and is preaching to the hidden. and want them to absorb a lot of knowledge by rote, a lot of notion by rote. Instead, if we understand and neuroimaging research shows us also that we are able to learn only if we have some, involved in interest in stimulation. And so, student-centered learning understand correctly that we have to put the student at the center, not the teachers. And I want to mention a famous Italian pedagogue, Maria Montessori, that also contributed to this field. Like Roger postulated and made a research on clients in student-centered learning, the aspect of self-discovery is the only significant form of learning. So I have to participate actively in my learning. Also, not only with my cognitive faculty, but also my emotion. So I'm going to cite some research. There is a growing evidence that courses with learner-centered approaches, and Gary and others were at the University of Berkeley last year, where we organized the launching basically of our initiative, the World University Consortium. A lot of top professors for excellent university were all saying the thing. It doesn't work. Also the MOOCs. People are afraid that they're going to substitute the education. There is no substitution for the relationship, and anything online or vis-a-vis has to be student-centered. The world is realizing that we've been wrong. But we've been wrong. Why? Because professors, because teachers don't want very easily to give their power away and empower the students. Otherwise, the research is very eloquent. Student-centered strategy have excellent results, enhance academic achievement, promote the development of important learning skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and the capacity to work constructively with others, which is a crucial skill. And the research, there are mountains of research, no matter what are the needs of learning, student-centered learning works. And increase the learner motivation, like for employees that are empowered, and actual learning increase when learner can decide, have some power to decide on their own learning, and are treated as co-creator in the learning process. This is comes with from 97. Learners that experience success in having new responsibility for the learning develop also important personal, psychological, and social skills, self-confidence, self-esteem. And this is, again, from the National Research Council and the Committee on Learning Research and Educational Practice in the United States. Learners have higher achievement when they succeed thanks to their own abilities and effort. But some people, when they hear this, they are afraid. Oh, we would create a license in our students. They would not learn the subject matter. They would not pass the exam. Well, nothing more wrong. Those fears have no ground. Because if you know how to do it, you have to be a student facilitator of learning that is effective, like you need to be effective in everything. But just to give you an example, My institute is based exactly, it was founded by Carl Rogers, it's based on student learning facility. And we train, for example, medical doctors, clinical psychologists, 4-year postgraduate to become psychotherapists. We don't have a traditional exam. We have a student-centered exam. But they are much, tough one. Every student, every learner has to write an essay in which she or he evaluate herself and himself and make those parameters transparent. And see if they have learned enough to meet the objective in terms of the cognitive, of the way to do and the way to be with their clients. Not only that, then they have to be evaluated by every single colleague in their class. And of course, in terms of the then they would have an evaluation of every single professor. And at the end, they would have to discuss with me the final conclusion on what grade they feel they deserve, but they have to have, an intense process of social construction of agreement with their peers and with their professors. I think it's much more relevant, this kind of evaluation that brings the ecology of the students. If the student is evaluated by the professor, say, oh, he didn't like me. If every single co-student is telling something that is not, that is dissonant with your self-perception, you might give a second look at what you're thinking about yourself. So there are a lot of research that they gain a self-confidence, self-esteem, and they have better results. So in everything that is students or person-centered, we facilitate positive change by supporting and promoting self-awareness and self-regulation. But that has to be grounded on some objectification of results, of course. And as professional, as person, we can benefit from the self-awareness and self-regulation process on the issue of power and professional relationship. In my opinion, we should really promote this awareness in the healthcare profession, but basically in every profession. Architects should be aware of what kind of housing they build, and maybe to be more aware of what they do, they should live a year in the homes they built for the others. And I think this is a win-win solution, as I stressed. But for example, one of my fields that I actually involve is the field of mental health or psychotherapy. Well, we have to understand that different approaches, different narratives do not promote the same kind of changes. Some approaches promote more empowerment, some approaches promote some dependency. Both promote symptom reduction, but how you reach the goal of symptom reduction is not different in general. So, to understand, I forgot the name of our colleague that is participating in the debate yesterday. I was in agreement with her about, we have to see clearly the implicit epistemology. So I think that we need different, angles of observation of this process. I just mentioned a few, the history of philosophy, the sociology of science, the sociology of knowledge, the sociology of medicine and health, because the history of medicine doesn't tell what is really going on and how it goes through. like psychology or psychotherapy or psychiatry. So epistemology and hermeneutics are really important angles to really look at it if we want to understand powers in the profession, the use of power. But anyhow, we should really remember how, from the hard science, we got a revolution in consciousness. Well, we always talk about revolution of consciousness, and people think that to have a revolution in consciousness, you have to enter its church. No, also a research lab. The people like Albert Einstein, Bohr, Heisenberg generated a revolution in our consciousness, gave us a new vision, made us aware that the universe in which we live is a universe that can be readily understood and navigated if we are aware that it's a universe of relationship. And that's why Rogers criticized the mechanicistic vision of human nature, like the psychological labeling. You know, the psychopathology doesn't seem to be very scientific or reliant. It changes every few years. Not only, if you take a patient and put her or him to be diagnosed by 30 expert diagnostician, often you have 30 different diagnoses. So this, disempowering action is far from scientific. Far from scientific. Diagnosing is much more revealing of the diagnostician and their value and their relationship with power than the patient they diagnose. This is, people do make statements, and since they are professional, it looks they're making scientific statements. They're making a statement out of their bigotry, out of their ignorance, out of their prejudice, out of their racism, out of their misogyny, out of their, phobia of sexual differences. The American Psychiatric Association, I was telling, until 1973, kept homosexual and lesbian as citizens affected by psychopathology when there was no one proof, not one researcher proving that. Actually, the opposite since 57, 58, 59. So, never forget that the revolution in consciousness that the Heisenberg principle brought us to be aware that when we want to declare what is that phenomena, be a human being especially, we are not seeing how is the human being. We've seen the relationship of that phenomena, the human being might be, with that instrument of measurement, so psychopathology labeling, with the observer, the scientist or the clinician. We have to be aware that everything we call, reality is a power act in relationship and also is value in good. So, we have to see that the different vision of human beings bring different results and different use of power. So, I'm asking this on my field, one of my fields, psychotherapy. I think it's important to ask ourselves if we have an approach that is ecological when regards to human beings, not just on tree and animals. So, going to complete. Empowering effectively requires that we know the knowledge how to do it, the skill how to really do it, but also the attitude, a way of being. And so, to be person, group, community, organization, or cultural center, we need all those skills. It's not just good intention. And to be aware that empowerment generates responsibility, and that is the ability to respond more effectively. Actually, we see in the change in medicine or in psychotherapy that some people say, no, I tell you my problem and you tell me how to solve them. It's not so easy. It doesn't work. You need to take your power, your responsibility to live a different life. So, I'm not going to repeat this. I'm just going to mention what the World Health Organization says since the 86 Ottawa Charter is the manifesto for this biopsychosocial approach. Caring, holism, and ecology are essential issues in developing strategy for health promotion. Therefore, those involved should take it as a guiding principle that in each phase of planning, implementation, and evaluation of health promotion activities, women and men, what we call citizens or patients, should become equal partners. And then the Ottawa Charter continued with the biopsychosocial view of health and its determinant is a radical departure from the mechanicistic biomedical approach. Medical doctors will still treat illness, but they will no longer exclusively be focused on disease as they were doing in the biomedical model. Health professionals must foster a significant change in the way people understand and how health is created and promoted. So, by empowerment. I also do a lot of grants proposal, and I ask money to various funding agencies in the field of health promotion, for example. And it hits me, and if you ask anybody that knows, you have to know, not of what they write in their web and the publication, but the real, points, how they evaluate the project. Now, it's very interesting that if you ask for grant money to do research, funding agency would give you money, if you do well your proposal, a project that wants to really investigate the individual, the single year, the family. But if you started to propose that you're going to analyze the social construction of disempowerment, for example, of women, it's not going to have as much satisfaction in grant writing. If we wanted to analyze what in the large society attack, pollute, and undermine health and well-being, what attacks and erodes human dignity and resilience, what measure inequality, exploitation, racism, sexism, ageism, violence, reification, and employment, you much less are we receiving the funds. Few years ago, my institute got 600,000 euro, which is not a big grant, isn't it? And, of all the experts we were submitted for some, suggestion, everybody was saying, play down the politics. They call the politics when you look at the larger picture. These are uncomfortable truths, as Al Gore called the movie Inconvenient Truth. So, another passage from Ottawa Charter, to enable people to increase control over and to improve their health professionals must adjust their perspective. Health professionals must become promoters of learning and empowerment. Good for the World Health Organization for this vision. For the health promoter, the focus includes individuals, the health system, the workplace, governmental agents, community, and society in general. So, as I said before, we have to watch, because being a patient can be dangerous for your health. The learner helpfulness is a research issue, and it's proven. Being a patient passive to develop learner helpfulness is the problem, not the solution. So, basically, I would wrap up in this statement. Society, in every sector of society, everybody needs to grasp that the real most important natural resource for a nation and community is people. And strange, we spend a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of energy in what we call the maintenance of infrastructure. But what about putting people first? How much we spend for armament? That's what Gary Jacobs has been working for 35 years and more, and the Mother Society and the Academy. How much we spend with people compared with armament? So, I finish it by, an optimistic statement, as usual. Let's be courageous. Let's first of all empower ourselves. Let's empower the people in our lives. It's not nice to preach empowerment for the masses if I don't do it with my wife, with my children, with my employees, with my colleagues. Seems strange. Let's promote, let's have a society and a culture that effectively promotes empowerment, and we would obtain a more able and a responsible citizenship. So, good luck to all of us, and thank you for our attention. Let's talk about it.
Thank you, Alberto, for your presentation. I have two footnotes. I like very much your student-centered approach, but I think there are at least two obstructions in order to be able to realize that approach. The first obstruction depends on the quality of teachers. You need to have high-quality teachers. That's not so trivial an issue, because low-quality teachers are simply unable to deal with such an informal environment, and they may not be able to support criticism, for instance. So, investing on the quality of teachers is a precondition for eventually being able to implement a student-centered approach. But that's only the beginning. There is a second obstruction that is important as well. As soon I'm considering universities, the level of university, as soon as the main rule governing the life of academicians is publish or perish, well, it means that no energy, no time, no effort should be invested in students. Because, you have to invest your energy in somewhere else in order to have success. And again, this is a major obstruction. We should develop, I'm speaking from the situations I know, obviously, but surely if the only rule is publish or perish, well, students, doesn't matter. There is no reason to invest in students. So we need a different vision in order to have time and give energy to students.
Thank you, Roberto. You helped me through this answer that is totally in agreement with you, your statement. I would say more. My own experience of teaching in Italian university at the postgraduate level, even in situations where the head of the department is a very good friend of mine. I've been often said, well, you know, Alberto, but you should treat the students. They are already, you know, professional, the students. You know, you shouldn't rock the boat. There is a lot of political issue barrier because a lot of people see student-centered approaches as losing power from the people who have power. And also, you know, a big competency. There is no doubt that the teacher, whatever the level of schooling, needs to be effectively trained to be student-centered. How we train teachers of every level is the opposite. As a matter of fact, we have an experience that in my institute in Italy has trained over the years about 50,000 teachers for the Ministry of Education. And although some are enthusiastic, a lot of teachers at the beginning hate the concept of student-centered. Actually, if you are, for example, let me also parents sometimes, you know, are parents, but it's also in the same being an effective parent. If you don't empower your children, you're not going to be as successful. So I think that you underline one of the many truths under what we say at the Academy. We need to change the process that we call education at every level. We have to transform education from a disempowering aspect of society to an empowering. It's not going to be easy, but it's encouraging to feel that the University of Berkeley conference on the new paradigm for education, everybody coming from very top university share the same concern and agree that the future we need a student or learner-centered education. So thank you for your comment.
We've got three. 1, 2, 3.
I have a question first, and then the comment, so to follow up. So, Alberto, do you regard case teaching methods as student-centered when they are forced to discover concepts? You are not giving a concept. They need to, by analyzing and discussing, they discover. This is what Roger said, you know. I mean, also, I guess it was also the statement of Einstein sometime before Second World War, the real knowledge is created in your head when you discover. I think that is very interesting, you know. You have physicists, genius physicists, and you have psychologists, you know, so philosophers, you know, are coming, you know, to the same conclusions from very different point of view. But anyway, this is the question, you know, it's a yes or no.
You want to say also the...
Yeah, this is, yeah, because, you know, if you look, you know, this, to teach, I mean, I try to do as much as possible to do teaching cases, which is not that yet common, you know, but since I got affiliated with the Harvard, I see, I mean, this is the basic way of delivery of the teaching process. And what is very interesting, you know, Alberto, I mean, good relations with Michael Porter, who is famous in economics and management, and he says, for us here, teaching cases is more important than publications. So the student center is regarded as more important, and Harvard is not that bad school. They are publishing pretty well. So somehow you can have that type of balance. And then, you know, whenever I'm coming there and I'm kind of regularly there, I really feel that the students are in the center. Also, professors are very well respected, you know, it's not about that, but that type of attitude to students, not as passive but active member of a learning process, and that facilitator role is very. And this is something what, you know, you touch the other issue important, and you need to attract to the teaching professions the best people. And then and this is not coincidence that Finland is regarded as the country with the best education system, because teachers are the best paid people. And it's very difficult to get to the system. You need to really be highly performing person. So somehow it has a logic. This is the clear logic, you know, from what we are talking, you know, from Gary to Alberto, shaping human being, educating new generation. There is nothing more important than this. So this is what we need to bring the best people to teach. And then, but in many cases we see the teachers belong and healthcare workers to the most discriminated. When I in Poland, I used to live 40 years. So they were the two largest group of society, professional groups, with the lowest salary. So we have that type of, we need to reverse that type of situation, change dramatically in order to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Big. Actually, yes, and Dr. Volkan, which is the son of the famous Turkish psychoanalyst, you know, I see him often. He comes to Europe. He's selling the Harvard School of Medicine strategy to teach medicine. And it's you know, true case. You know, they say, now, you have to find how we treat this kind of problem, and they have to go find the literature, work as a group, and only if they get it wrong, they would know from their professor, well, this and explain. And so, the research, the neuroscience, Roberto was mentioned, the neuroscience, it takes us that only what Carl Rogers said before the neuroscience knew that, you know, was saying it in the 40s, and Dewey, well before Rogers, and Kilpatrick, there are tons of people, not the majority, that we learn through the experience. And learning is not a cognitive alone kind of endeavor. Emotions are very important. And it's proven that the research, I didn't mention, not to be bored, Tausch and Taub in Germany, they had a research for years registering the behavior teachers in the classroom of the mandatory school, you know, level. The teachers that speak all the time have much less learning from the student. The best teachers that produce better learning, better frequency, no? People are going less absenteeism, and less destructive behavior in the classroom are the teachers that listen more than speaking all the time, that understand empathically their student, and that can, instead of being disciplined, I punish you, motivate them in projects of learning that are co-owned and co-decided with their student. It's not that we're talking about having license, that everybody does whatever, you know. It's helping people to be constructed through empowerment.
Winston. Yeah, a number of points I wanted to raise. First, learning process has to have some evaluation system. It will usually come with something along those lines. And I've had some experience with this in which that in turn has a significant effect on the learning process itself and on the question of empowerment and disempowerment. In a sense, at least in many of the systems that I'm familiar with, usually these learning, the evaluated instruments are done bureaucratically. In the state of Scotland, they're done by the Board of Regents, for example. It doesn't matter what you teach, this is what is going to be evaluated. It's very good. And when I looked critically at this myself, I said, oh my God, I'm doing the opposite of what this thing requires, you know. One of the central objectives of my teaching is to get some creativity out of the students. And maybe in the culture of law that isn't necessarily high priority, but I think the practice of law requires some creativity. And so I looked around for another instrument, and I found the University of Southern California had something very similar to what I was doing. Here, the evaluator was asking, well, did the instructor bring some interdisciplinary? Did he engage you? And how much preparation did you do? Did you really read the assignment? And so on and so on. And so what I did was I modified that to suit the objectives of the course I had set, and I used the states model. Now I usually got extremely stellar evaluation on that modified Southern Cal one. And on the state one, when I wasn't doing what the state said I should be doing, I got lower evaluations. Then I was particularly interested in how that affected students. And I think it did because what the evaluation instrument did was it shaped different expectations. It shaped them so that they really didn't look for empowerment. They wanted to be sausage machine made, spoon-fed, conformist, etc., etc. So eventually the dean said that the word had come from the Board of Trustees that I would not be allowed to use that instrument of mine. Because there was such a discrepancy and they couldn't explain it. And I said, well, any possibility of a discussion of it? No, that's all. Now, what I think that means is that, and I don't know how it would apply to many other fields, but I suspect that there's a great deal more learning that goes with the instrument of evaluation than we realize. And it's not only the matter of empowerment, it's responsible empowerment. I've also found as a chap teaching PhDs that when we first brought women teachers into the classroom, and the majority of the students were male, those evaluations were very sexist. You know, they had gratuitous comments about the breasts of the women and the buttocks of the women, things that had absolutely nothing to do with the course, you see. And I confess I was chairing the committee, and I just threw all these things out, although they were demanding that it should be let in. I couldn't understand why. Some person abusing the empowerment should leave that on the record, you know, for eternity. So I think it is a bit more complicated because no matter how we preach the question of learning, problem solving, empowerment, they basically ultimately require us to fundamentally challenge what we mean by knowledge, how it's communicated, and that includes a number of, shall we say, intellectual tests. If you, whatever field you're in, you must know something about causes, consequences, science. You must know something about values in a descriptive and in a normative sense. You've got to understand a bit of history, understanding a trend. You've got to understand some futuristics. This way, where might you be going? And you've got to look at the question of creativity as an aspect of any form of problem solving. So you've got a number of intellectual skills, but I don't think we self-consciously look at whatever we're doing and then ask the hard question, well, how does this fit into the problem that we're dealing with? Where does psychotherapy come in? Where does psychopathology come in? Where does history come in? Where does the more general framework of scientific truths come in? How do we grapple with the problem of scientific truths and moral truths, or value truths and so on? And where does law and jurisprudence fit in as it weaves into all these other disciplines? So I think the question of how to approach empowerment is still going to be an unfulfilled task, in the sense that we have still not developed sufficient coherence about the fundamentally transdisciplinary nature of knowledge relevant to improving human prosperity.
Well, very interesting point you're making. I would say that where you have the power to decide how learner-centered is your program, you are better off. But for example, as I try to underline, it certainly is not empowerment. The person that is empowered is made more responsible. So, for example, in our program that are postgraduate program, you're not going to graduate if you don't show that you have met the objective in terms of knowing, doing, and being, the three variables. So, actually, nobody graduates if not only is in agreement that they have to graduate, but all his schoolmates and all these professors are in agreement. It's no hanky-panky possible. It's much more, how you say, in a sense, much more responsible. In terms of the objective of learning, though, is co-created. So, not only professor would object to variable, like you mentioned, how attractive are the women, but they are all their mates, their schoolmates, their course mates that wouldn't accept any stupid fun. And so, the research, let me say, I strongly feel there is not a single excuse not to be applying student-centered learning. There is not a valid scientific excuse to avoid empowering people, because the research that we accept for the other data is very eloquent and is available on Google for anybody. So I would suspect that somebody saying that student-centered learning is not possible, he should examine her or his own difficulty with giving power away and making because empowering is empowering for real. It means that, for example, to give an example, every one of our students every year not only evaluate herself or himself and everything, but evaluates me, the boss, and every other teacher, evaluates the secretary work, evaluates if the facility, including the toilets, are cleaned up. So, it's sometimes I feel also uncomfortable with all this environment, because it needs that I'm willing to face the other perception. But also, it's great learning for me. That's, not that I like all the time, I have to confess. But in my opinion, the research are very eloquent, and also, my experience is very rewarding, because our people arrive and they are religiously thinking, we are better than other approaches. And then they go out. Not only they are good professionals, but they are much more mature person. And I think that is important aspect. But to finalize what we were saying, because what you're saying is very important. Let's say, I am training people on a student-centered approach to be civil engineers and build bridges. If the result would be that these people are very satisfied, very actualized in their needs, but build bridge that fall when cars and people pass by, would be not, student-centered learning, would be a disaster of education, no matter if a student. It has to be, giving results. It cannot be just having students more happy. We're talking about not making people happy, making people more responsible. Exactly, so I'm in agreement with you. Responsibility is the name of the game, and not just for the professor, for the student. You cannot go scot-free.
We have two more.
Okay, I have just a short observation of a practical nature. A bit in the same way, I as well agree that actually I don't think that we have, as a society, come to a level high enough to actually foster stronger human rights, especially for persons with psychosocial disabilities, more perhaps than for any other minority group that we have. And they are actually least empowered since they're actually treated as children. So when I look at the schemes that we have, not only in Eastern Europe, but in Western Europe and in the States, I don't think with the resources that we have at hand, I don't actually think we've come a long way from one flight over cuckoo's nest, which is in itself quite appalling. And I just wanted to make a practical observation where I think that we in Europe should look out to the States model, as they do have legal clinics at their universities, which is something that's not so widespread in Europe. But I've seen that, and it's my opinion that the legal clinics actually can make a lot of difference for students, because they enable medical students and law students to work together, and from the time that they are actually in college, to work on case law and to see through different exact cases how their actions are going to affect actual real persons. So this is something that I think that we lack in Europe, but that would come in very handy. Not to mention that I as well actually quite like the American civil rights approach in relation to our welfare approach when we talk about mental disability law, where I see that they've gotten much further than we did. And I think it's also, which kind of takes me back to the first lesson about the individual achievements, but the civil rights approach actually is the one that does create big leaps through specific cases and precedents, which is something that I think we could also use in European legislation.
Thank you for your comment. I would just say a brief comment also. In Berkeley, California, since the time I went and lived there in 1968, I was impressed by the Center of Independent Living. It's a center that helps people that cannot walk with their legs or use their arms as most of all do, are all over Berkeley, in shops, in theater, in movie theater, and they are given, through this technology, little scooters, little wheelchair, but they do everything. They reach places that normal wheelchair. And if you see people like it's their right to be able to function, then actually it's a prophecy self-fulfilling. The problem sometimes in Europe, or like in Italy, family were ashamed to have a challenged person in their family. And so they kept them hidden in their house because having a challenged person was something to be, in a sense, embarrassed. So we need to change the consciousness of people before the human rights were granted to people of color in many countries. It was just a matter of consciousness. Then that consciousness, Winston is an expert on this, getting embodied into the law, but it's about promoting awareness.
Carlos, I think you had a comment.
Yes, thank you. I enjoyed the presentation. Unfortunately, I had to attend an important course, so I lost part of it, but it sounded very good to me and very inspiring. I've just, not a comment, but a very practical question. Very practical doesn't mean necessarily very easy to answer. But the thinkers and practitioners you mentioned as founders of this vision of student-centered approach all were born at the end of 19th century or very start of the 20th century, so they developed their work in the first half of 20th century. We are now in 2014, and the question is pretty obvious. So many decades after they developed their work, and it doesn't seem the educational system has changed so much between that time and now. And so the question is, what failed? Because this vision, of course, it's a personal vision which we share in this room. This vision makes a lot of sense, and I would think it would make a lot of sense for many people in the educational system. Why doesn't the system have changed already so many years, so decades after these ideas were put on the table, developed, worked out? So I know there is a Montessori system of schools, but the things which exist, I'm not an expert, the things which exist are tiny compared to the size of the overall educational system. Why it doesn't change? Why it is so opaque to these ideas? So,
Alberto, before you answer that, I'd like to throw in another question, which I think is connected to this one, so that you can answer them both. And I'll make it explicit. I'm just going to, so you can see the relationship. Is there any limits to empowerment? The system's willingness to empower is one thing. In your experience, is there any limits to empowerment from the point of view of the beneficiaries, if that's not the right word? But is there anything that limits the amount of empowerment you can give from the side of the recipients? I don't know whether that's an answer to this or it's another, but if there is, it could be part of
Is
this.
your question designed specifically about empowerment in the educational context?
Mine was
general.
I
just wanted to make sure.
Mine was much more general, but it would apply in education.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Well, to both. Well, my answer, and I think that there are enough data through history, even before, empowerment is not actually generated by doing. If you go back in history, Jesus Christ and Buddha were, basically talking about empowerment and responsibility and many others. But I have a very good, simple answer. Very rarely you find people that have power willing to share that power. And they would fight tooth and nail not to relinquish their power, although they are also aware that is not socially constructed. They don't give a damn about social construction. As some famous mafiosi, organized crime in Italy, have a saying, to have power is more enjoyable than to make love. When human psychopathology is this serious, you're not going to have an easy task at promoting self-empowerment. So the obstacle to empowerment in society are basically based at the level of psychopathology of individual and society. But let's not make of empowerment a stupid, superficial thing as time is made to undermine power. Like the right of women are undermined by the stupid statement that women don't know how to drive car as good as men. These are coming just for people that don't want to tackle seriously with the issue. The point is that in history, in Italy, for example, it's many years that we have a law of equal opportunity. We had a law of equal opportunity because women are discriminated through men. Now, slowly, like a human right, you wouldn't say that a black person in the United States even today has an equal chance than a white person, although the law are in effect. So it's what I was talking yesterday, the social construction of reality. But let's not, every time we generalize something, we are undermining that something. Of course they are limited when empowerment is not beneficial. Let me make an example. If that I'm totally convinced about the importance and positive aspect of empowerment, if now I cross the street and a car hits me and I'm bleeding and you carry me to the first emergency room in the local hospital, I don't want the doctor, wasting any time to ask me, sir, let's construe together the decision of how I'm going to save your life. I want the doctor to act immediately without any waste, because in that case, it's to my benefit that somebody does an emergency procedure. You know what I mean? So it's never the mean is to always reach an end. The moment you lose the reason for doing something, that something can be dysfunctional and perverted. So I don't think empowerment would work in every place, and we can see it also in voluntary workers or aid workers. If I go and I do some important empowerment of people to know about the smallpox, vaccination. But they will, against me, and they convince people that I'm there to poison them. Well, I have to work, on the social construction of reality. It doesn't make any sense that I want to empower people if people do not want to empower. And sometimes patients don't want to know. That's a very good example about it. You have a cancer, and me as a doctor, I'm not a medical doctor, I have to understand how much you want to know to person-centered my information to you. Because if you give me harmful signals that you don't want to know, well, I should respect your power to determine how much information you get. Never forget the relationship. That's my case.
Can I just say one last point? Okay. Well, the social construction of knowledge is obviously a useful concept, but I think at a more practical level, what we're dealing with is the, shall we say, academic construction of knowledge. And that is largely done through disciplines which are hierarchically organized. And the consequence is each hierarchy has its own internal power structure. It's funded according to that line of thought and so on. And of course, the problem then is if we are looking at how this relates to social reality, each discipline is only giving a little piece of the explanation or a piece of the solution. And our problem then is how do you break disciplinary barriers given the funding, the hierarchy, the internal construction of validation within the discipline and so on. And that still remains a large problem.
And it's called building a more democratic society.
Okay. Alberto, that was terrific. Thank you very much. And you set us up for the afternoon sessions too.
Thank you.
Okay.